Rolling with part two.
Part two. And here it is, again, the 25th day of December, 2018. We're talking about Daniel 12, and I mentioned at the tail end of the last video about this word Yaakov, Jacob, that it meant to follow behind the wake of a ship, but it also means consequence or reward, or because, or of a consequence of. Covered with footprints. It means a number of other things. Page 481 of the Red Dictionary by Ernest Klein. In other words, you could read it like the reason for his name Jacob was that he was deceitful. It means that. The meaning of the name Jacob was footprint. So they've found that all through Saudi Arabia, from ancient times, somebody carved numerous, hundreds and thousands of footprints on the rocks. Well, it was the people of Israel as they were wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years, carving, tracing around their feet footprints to show, because Elohim told Abraham, wherever you walk, that'll be yours. And he said to Israel, wherever you go, that'll be yours. So they carved their footprints, because the name Jacob means covered with footprints. So one way to get the benefit of learning Hebrew with this dictionary is that words mean many different things. Brad Scott has a tape series called Word Means Things, and you can look at a word and realize how to see into a word, but in the spelling of a word, a depth, way more than just a single word translation like in an interlinear version. There's probably a dozen meanings of this word ayin kuf bet, to hinder or prevent, like Jacob, put up his hand to keep his brother Esau from kicking him in the head, or was he grabbing at his heel to usurp his position? It can mean both. Follow at the heel, to circumvent, overreach. Using this dictionary is a great thing to do. That's a whole nother thing that we could get into if people want one of these days. Let's get on to Daniel 12. Just for what it's worth, I showed this in one of the other videos. I've been working for 15 years on a deck of cards that people can play of the Hebrew language. This is a version of the cards. Each one of these little squares is one of the cards. The cards are not yet made. If anyone would like to donate some funds to get these cards made, I would appreciate it. We could give out the cards. 300 or so cards in a deck. Like to get them made as professional quality, so that people can play games instead of with hearts, clubs, diamonds, spades, and instead of jack, queen, king, ace, it's the letters of the aleph-bet. So here, right at the top is the Mishkan pattern. This is fit for earth, air, fire, water. There's the Mishkan pattern, there's the stone petroglyph, there's the flame letters, the modern cursive with the watery background, the Paleo-Hebrew, the pictograph, the number value, and then at the bottom, Greek in the bronze metal color and Latin English in the iron, like the statue that Daniel translated for Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2, where the midsection of bronze represented Greece, the legs of iron represented Rome. The point is, the PDF file for this graphic I just did is on my website, and you're welcome to use it. These are other cards in the deck, and that's other matters. But just to say, I'm going to reference this for Daniel 12. Verse 4. As for you, Daniel, obscure the matters and seal the book until the time of the end. Let many muse and let knowledge increase. I remember learning this verse in the King James as, for many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Let many muse, here is translated, there is translated, many shall run to and fro. Let many muse, that's where we get the word amusement and music. So let many be entertained. Many shall run to and fro. Well, we've got cars and trains and space shuttles, but we've also got Hollywood entertainment industry. It's like, what's it talking about? You look this word up, if you know how to read Hebrew, it's Yod, Shin, Tet, Tet, Vav. Well, the word Shin tet tet isn't translated here, but in the dictionary you'll see that it means apostasy. It also means to be a rover and a rambler. I've been a rambling man, a rover and a wanderer. It's all those words. As a matter of fact, the root of that word, in the book of Job, it says the wanderer came up and was speaking to the Almighty, and the Almighty says, "Where have you been? What have you been doing?" He says, "Well, I've been wandering." But you see, that word is translated as the adversary, Satan. Shin tet nun is this same word, only a different suffix. It means to wander, to rove, to ramble. The Allman Brothers did a song about being a rambling man. It was a nice song, but hey, it's satanic, literally. What do we do with these words? It's a picture of oars splashing about, like on one of these big galley ships where you had 100 oars that had to pull in exact unison, like in a rowboat, but instead the oars are flailing and splashing and getting nowhere. It also means to be apostate, deviant, rebellious, refractionary, which is just like a white light comes into a prism and shoots off in different colors of the spectrum. It's the same type of word. The only way to really know what this is saying is to study the text on your own, word by word, letter by letter. The best I can do is make these simple little graphics and make these little videos trying to help people who want to be able to put their attention to these words. I was talking to somebody last night, and they had an experience where, because of their entertainment, movies, books, games, videos, whatever they were looking at, they suddenly found themselves possessed by a demonic force which urged them to kill themselves and jump over the cliff of a banister and land on their neck and down a couple more cliffs. They survived. But they encountered Yeshua, who told this person to, I don't know exactly how, but to get rid of their entertainment and to seek Him with all their heart. How do you do that? You could read this word, shin tet tet, as entertainment. How do you spend your time when you're not working? Well, there's certain diligent things. You got to clean, you got to bathe, you got to eat, you got to acquire the things you need to conduct your life. But then there's a certain amount of free time. What do you do with your free time? I suggest that if we look at the previous verse that I just read a moment ago, the wise, that's the word for prudent and intelligently minded, where you apply your brain to something. His words. Apply your mind with your whole heart and soul, Deuteronomy 30, to these words. You will shine like the radiance of the firmament, and you will find righteousness, to be able to teach righteousness, to encourage. I believe that the words of Hebrew, the letters of Hebrew, is the place of righteousness, zadikah, which is the exact same word as victory, deliverance, and salvation. There's a few different words that mean salvation. Yahusha, the name of the Mashiach, 2,000 years ago, is one of the words, but this is another one of the words. Zadik, zadikah. If you know what these letters mean, they'll tell you where righteousness is found, and they'll tell you where victory and deliverance and escape is found. Deliverance. How do I know that these letters have anything to do with this subject? That's what's encoded in this chapter. And here we're going to go through it rather simply, rather quickly, so it's not too long of a video. This could be many hours of research. On that chart that I made back in 2010 with the vertical stripes, the very last line is Daniel 12 laid out for every letter of the aleph-bet. So I'll show you how that fits in. The concept, as for you, Daniel, this angel, this malak, is now giving Daniel a job. He's telling him to do something. Obscure the matters, that's an action. Seal the book, that's another action. until the time of the end. Now this says it's only for a certain amount of time, and then that hiding and sealing is going to stop, in which case things are different. I maintain, just to give you an overview, that that was over as of 2010. It's a different story. We've talked about that before. I could elaborate, but just to carry on with this, I think that the time of the obscuring of the matters and the sealing of the book that Daniel was told to impose in chapter 12, verse 4, is over as of 2010, 8 years ago. We're now on the other side of the envelope of this, call it a curse, this obfuscation of the meaning of the letters. And how did Daniel do it? I think Daniel took these petroglyphic letter shapes and turned them into the modern Hebrew flame letters, which these days, that you'll find in the land of Israel, most people write with the cursive letter shape down here, which is even yet more obscure. And I'm suggesting that the clarity of the pictographic value of these Paleo-Hebrew letters are even more clear than the petroglyphs, because they carry the message of the Mishkan pattern that was embedded in Exodus 25. And it says right here, Exodus 25:9, where the word tabanit ha-mishkan, the word tabanit means pattern, and the word pattern is the word beni, my son, in between two letters of the tav, so it could be read as my son, mediating the signatories of the covenant, or my son. Well, who's his son? He calls Israel his son, he calls Adam his son, and he calls Yeshua his son. So take your pick. You could be, because son is also could be translated as children, my children wrapped up in the covenant. Yeshua is the one who can be identified as being embodied or described by every one of these 22 letters. That's how I can be absolutely convinced that Yeshua, the man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago, perhaps his name was pronounced Yahusha, nevertheless, he is the Mashiach, because his story in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are fit to these 22 letters progressing in the Hebrew aleph-bet. That's what convinces me that he's the guy. So the point is, the aleph, like an ox head, almost looks like an arrowhead that you would, if you're the archer, you would shoot to the target, tav, in the distance, is to be compelled or sent, like the ox pulling the plow, like the arrow towards the target. So Daniel was told, obscure the matter, seal the book, and then he was given the duration until the time. That's the aleph. And if we're following this in alphabetic sequence, the next phrase, I'm trying to show you the pattern, the next phrase would be in the bet position. So this is the bet phrase. And I broke these up just based on subjective consideration, trying to see, because I had a hunch that there was a pattern here, and so this is what I found. I'm telling you what I found back in 2005. Let many muse and let knowledge increase, or let many run here and there or go apostate, and knowledge increases. If you looked at every word here, you might read it different. We're not going to look at every word. We could look at every word, but that would be many lengthy hours. We should do a class sometime. If somebody wants me to teach that, that's another matter. But the point is, the word bet means house. It's to put something in that could come out. It's a seed inside its husk. It's a brain inside a skull. Part of the letter bet is like the brain, and the other part is like the arm extending out, which is why the letter bet in Paleo is drawn like that. It's the vertical view looking straight down on the floor plan of a house. You've got the public vestibule, and then you've got what they call my father's house, or tucked around, which is the personal side there, like the brain, which is the symbol pictographically here. So the concepts thematically are embedded in this narrative. Daniel was given a mission, that's the aleph. It's talked about being put into like this seed that will float on the winds of time until it gets to the end, which 2010. The next position being a gimel, the next verse in verse 5 here, the next phrasing says, Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others are standing, one on this side of the riverbank and one on that side of the riverbank. Where's a gimel? A gimel's a camel. There's no camel here. It's encrypted. The letter gimel is kind of sort of shaped like a boomerang. It goes out and it comes back. A camel is the ship of the desert. It's used for transport. It goes out and it comes back, like a car on the highway. And so there's this reciprocal mirror imaging back and forth thing going on. So picture Daniel, and he's talking to this guy, and he looks and he sees one on this side of the riverbank and one on that side of the riverbank. And I'm exaggerating because his head has to look back and forth to see the two sides of the riverbank. And it's like, well, that's the implication of two different sides, this way and that way. And the word spelled gimel-lamed, and in the paleo, the gimel and the lamed are these two letters that are mirror shapes of each other. The word gimel-lamed, it means to be round and roll like a wheel. It's the word for Gal, Golgotha, Goliath. It's the head, it's the skull. It's a round thing that rolls like a sphere. And it's the reciprocal shape like a revolving door if you look straight down on it. So gimel is always about back and forth. The word galut means the exiles that were kicked out, that were told they can come back. So this thing about this side of the river and that side of the river is the gimel thing. It's gimel stuff. Now you might say, hey, how do you know it's not some other letter? I bet you I could look at a kuf or a resh or a kaf and fit those in too. Well, maybe you could. It might be worth the exercise. To consciously think about the letters and see what fits. But I'm just following the natural alphabetic sequence and found that it fits. So now I'm trying to elaborate so that you can see my reasoning as to why I think this is such an incredible map. This is a treasure map. Talked about that at Sukkot and Shavuot of 2017, which is on the website. The treasure map is, I think, up on the website too. I was going to modify it a little bit, but that's another matter. We'll talk about that later. So, seeing one on this side and that side of the riverbank, that's gimel. The next letter has to be the dalet. Verse 6. Somebody said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, there's somebody on this side of the river, someone on that side of the river. Now there's somebody above the river clothed in white linen. Now regardless of the staging, regardless of your beliefs, it's said prophetically, whoever this comes from, it's generally given that waters represent peoples. Okay, so there's waters of the river. So here are peoples through the continuum of time. And then there's one above the waters of the river. One way or another, that's a Rav, a Resh-bet, a great man, a Ram, an exalted man, a Messiah figure. Whoever it might be, he's kind of a Messiah figure. He's a great one, above, floating above somehow, the other waters of the river, all the peoples throughout time. And he's clothed in white linen. Well, white linen metaphorically speaks of robes of righteousness. So now here's this righteous Messiah figure, whoever that might be. But that's the dalet position. So now we can associate dalet with a righteously clothed, victorious Messiah figure. And then it goes on to say, and Daniel says, or somebody said to the man clothed in linen above the waters of the river, how long till the concealed end? Or, hey you, how long till the end of these wonders? Which is another translation. Well, the next letter was a hey, and hey means to, literally, a picture pictographically down here of a guy going, hey! As a word, it means the, which is to specify. In the modern weather maps, this exact image is used to show the direction of the wind blowing. So this is to, Yeshua said, you can't see the wind, you can see the effects, you can see the trees blowing, the clouds, you can see the ships using the wind, but you can't see the wind. Even so is the Ruach. So you can see the effects, you have to determine, and so this is like, hey, this is to get a glimpse of how the Ruach is leading. And he's asking for understanding. And then the next phrase says, I heard the man, now we're at the Vav position, and he's saying he heard the dalet. So what I'm saying is that there's an equality between the vav and the dalet shown here. I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, as he lifted his right hand and his left hand to the heavens. Well, the reason I draw the vav like this, it's a position of a guy standing here like this, is because of this verse. There's another way to draw a vav, more like this down here, but I draw it like this because it looks like a man standing here, kind of clothed in a white linen robe. So if that vav is that dalet, it's interesting that this Yahusha, who showed up 2,000 years ago as a man, hey look, he looks just like a man clothed in flesh, who claimed to be the door, the dalet, by which we could gimel back, returning to the bet, the house of Aleph, Abba, through him. He came to the earth, revealed as a man who would be put to the weapon and put into the tomb, the round rock rolled in front of it, and sealed by the Roman seal. But he said, no one does this, I do it myself. So by his own hand, for you, he did this. The word aleph means I will, that's the big idea. Bet gimel dalet, like this, like a bullet point. The emissary, the voyager, the ambassador, there's a ladder here that he comes down to this realm. Bet gimel dalet means to be camouflaged, clothed in deceit. He came looking like a man from this other dimension to be put to the weapon like the red heifer sacrifice outside the temple, the Mishkan fence. So this is the way to read the identity of Messiah according to the Mishkan pattern. Fit to these letters. The next phrase, he lifted his right hand and left hand, there's the vav, to the heavens, and swore by him who lives forever, or swore by the life source of the world. Different translation, you have to read the Hebrew to find out the distinction there. But the letter 7 is the word shavah, shin bet ayin, and it means to swear a vow. So when it says that that vav man swore a vow, putting his right and left hand up like this, well, that's a picture of Yeshua being nailed to the cross, being pinned to the weapon. And the letter vav means nail. So there's a little figure of a stick figure of a man, like a specimen who, in a pin or a nail, he was pinned to the weapon, though the Zion looks like an axe, meaning to cut off. He was cut off like the Sabbath day is cut off from the other days of the week and cuts off a week from the following week. There's all these themes and meanings within the language, fit to the pictures. And there's some people, as we mentioned before, don't like the idea that there's pictographs in the Paleo that has anything to do with Yod-He Vav-He, or Yeshua, or the covenant, or Israel. They think it's all just Canaanite, pagan, heathen, deity hieroglyphs. Not true. These are all Yahweh's pictures. They're not pagan pictures. They became that because his people threw his stuff away. That's a different story. The point is, he said, how long to the concealed end? Because the end has been concealed. Different way to read that. But this guy held up his hand, swore by the life source of the world that after a period, periods and a half, it's translated in KJV as time, times and a half a time, or 3.5 years. Uh-oh, there's the tribulation. There's the eschatology. No! What it says is, la moed, moedim, vechatzi. If you look at the word moed, just to show you where this goes, this is on page 327, it means appointed time, okay, but it also means forewarned or cautioned. Huh? Where's 3.5 years of tribulation? Forewarned or cautioned or directed. Directed? Directed what? Moedim. Well, those are the festivals. The directed Moedim line up with these Mishkan pattern. There's Pesach, Chag HaMatzot, Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shemini Atzeret. Those are the Moedim, translated word seasons in Genesis 1. He made appointed times. Yom HaShabbat, Leviticus 23, is one of the appointed times. That's the Sabbath day, the seventh-day Sabbath of 52 weeks a year. Then there's 7 appointed times, 2 of which last a week. One of them lasts counting 50 days. So what is this saying? He could be saying here, when the festivals, as appointed, as directed, vechatzi, Chatzi, what does that mean? Well, that's the word arrow or sagittal, like the word Sagittarius, the constellation with the guy with the bow and arrow. Arrowhead, like the letter aleph. That's the word chatzi. But also you see a highway and you see partition lines in the street. That's the word chatz. You see these doorways here separating this room from that room. That's the word chatz. It's not necessarily an arrow, and it doesn't necessarily mean half a year. We're going to have to go a little faster here because we're running out of time. Just pretty quick. But what I'm saying is, you could say when as directed, they separate themselves from the flow of traffic to regard the Moedim. Why, that's what's been going on since 2010. I know a lot of people that have separated themselves from mainstream Christianity, mainstream Judaism, mainstream Greco-Roman culture as it's been turned around down here, and they're going back to the significance of the Paleo-Hebrew understanding as if Yahweh was revealing himself and his own heart, so that if we regard those things, then he can re-plug himself into our equation of life on earth, and like we said with the checkerboard, flip the tables and turn everything around as he promised, which I've never heard Christian eschatology ever track the trace of that ship. That's what this is about. Upon the completion of the fragmenting of the hands of the holy people, well, tet is a full basket where you put crumbles of things. So this next phrase fits the letter tet. I could elaborate on every letter. We're not going to do that. I'm going to speed things up a little bit more now. I'm just showing you the trace to prove the point that I think Daniel wrote this to hold the meaning of the letters pictographically, according to the Paleo-Hebrew, that you can't necessarily see with the modern, but I bet you if we could go back and analyze the modern, we'd find the exact same meanings in them. That's another study. So there's the tet. Completion of the fragmenting the hands of the holy people, because the letter tet is the number 9 and it means full, complete basket. All these will be finished. And I heard it, but I didn't comprehend it. So it's like I heard it, I didn't comprehend it. Well, if you don't get it, it's like you're grabbing at something and you missed. Well, the letter Yod is a hand that grabs, and he's like, oh, no, I couldn't grab it. And so he asks again, and the open hand of them asking is like, can I have it? That's the open hand of the cough, the open cough, the cupped hand. And he says, my Lord, what is the end? He's asking. The letter Lamed is this instruction, the guy holding the shepherd's staff, and he says, go, Daniel. That's the command to go. That's the shape of the letter Lamed as the authority. Mem is something hidden like in a womb, like in a bowl, and it says, go, Daniel, for the matters are obscured and sealed until the time of the end. He says what he was told him to Aleph are certainly now memmed. They've been determined to be memmed from on high, and Daniel was used as the agent to accommodate it. It's on the, excuse me, we have to plug the camera in. It's on this side right over here, down at the bottom on the outside. See that little U shape?
I got it. Go ahead.
Okay, don't want to run out of juice here. Verse 10. The letter Nun, the next letter, is an action imparted about something. Well, it's talking about they will be elucidated. So, again, you have a different translation. It's going to lead you on the different trail. You'll be doing different type of detective work depending on your translation. So you have to go back to the Hebrew to see what it really is if you want to do the job of finding the right ship. O Jacob, O Yaakov. They will be elucidated, clarified, and refined by many people. That's the action of the letter Nun concerning the words that Daniel was told to hide. Look on the internet, see how many versions there is. Hundreds of versions of these words, but none of them match looking at the original Paleo-Hebrew pictographic letters. Not even the modern flame letters. You'll get something different from it. Ask anybody who knows about Hebrew, even Michael Heiser, Michael Brown, and Miles Jones. Ask Stan Tenen, the astrophysicist. You'll see. If you look at the modern Hebrew flame letters, you'll get a different take than if you look at the pictographic. None of those guys like the pictographic paleo, just so you know. The wicked will act wickedly. There's the Psalmic, like the guy in the watchtower. So you've got Yeshua giving us examples of the good steward and the bad steward. Many will be bad stewards not attending to these words. None of the wicked will understand. The next letter is the ion, like the eyeball over the scales, looking to balance things rightly. And those who determine to be wicked poke their own eyes out and can't understand, and it's fitting the schedule. The next thing on the schedule here is the pay, which is the open mouth. Yeshua, at the Sermon on the Mount, it said he sat down, opened his mouth, and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." To sit and listen to his open mouth is to have your eyes opened. And it says here, the wise will understand. The wise will listen to Yeshua's words, expounding on the words of Yod-He Vav-He that he spoke to Moshe and says, teach these to my Bnei Israel, my children of Israel, teach them these words. He told us to write these words, the word katub. He told us to read these words, the word yikra, and he told us to teach these words. Yahuwah commanded Israel to be a literate people. If you're not literate, as of this point, it's your own choice. Thus, your own fault, your own doing. We're making these videos so people can choose to be literate, choose to hear, choose to shema, shamar, and oseh. Do what he said. Those are all words that are pertinent. The next letter, zadi, which is a sprout coming back to life. From the time the daily offering was removed and the mute abomination put in place. Well, this lines up with the Ark of the Covenant and the Ten Commandments, the Sefer Brit, the writing of the covenant was put in the Ark of the Covenant. But to say that the Torah, to say that the instructions were nailed to the cross and done away with, is to render them as mute and to replace them, as we read in Daniel 10, that something slippery was cut off and fractioned and made detestable. Replacing it is what brings desolation. It's an abomination. So this phrase right here, the mute abomination put in place, lines up with just what we read in the previous chapter about what this bad guy's going to come and do, but that the people of Israel who know their Elohim, because they know his words by his letters, because it's his heart and character that are in every word and letter, they will escape and they will succeed and they will be victorious, it says. He's telling us, here's the script for succeeding whatever the eschatology comes out to be. Learn Hebrew, Ivit, the Shafah Kadosh. It's the language of the sacred tongue. Learn Ivrit Hebrew. Put in place 1,290 years. That's the letter Kuf. That's the overview, like the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, smoke spreading out over the camp above the Mishkan. So like this aerial helicopter view, the Kuf almost looks like the rotor blade of a helicopter, like a mushroom shape. You get this overview, it's like, oh, I see. So he gives you this scope. The next letter is Resh, the exalted man. Here's a picture of a guy with wings and kind of a crown, a lit crown on his head. And it says, praiseworthy is he who awaits and reaches 1,335. So there's the praiseworthy. Now Sheen is teeth and fire. It's that which consumes. It's that which you're provided. Remember, El Shaddai means the provider of all benefits and the overwhelming destroyer of all opposition. So he's the one who gives us our days to live. We burn out our flame until it's quenched. He says, as for you, go to your end, you will rest. And then Tav, the sign of the covenant, you will arise for your portion, as promised at the end of days. And as we read, the word akov means reward, consequence. You get your paycheck on payday. The letter Tav is the promise that as we conducted our life, we will arise to either shame and abhorrence or to life, as he said back there in Daniel 10. Different ways to read this. So the big question, as we end here, the question is, gosh, where along this map, this chart, where are we collectively on the history of the face of the earth? I could sit here and say, well, the kingdom was given at one time. Yeshua came in here. Well, this is the model of Yeshua. Yeshua rose from the dead. He ascended into the heavens. He's going to come back as the great king. Okay, there's the story of Yeshua. But what about Israel? Israel was given preeminence, Israel went into captivity. But he talks about Israel coming back. Israel coming back and doing what he said, waking up. So I would say, well, there's two places where there's a sprout coming back to life. One is the noon and one is the zadi. To sprout and come back to life, that's kind of like be the menorah, listen to his words. Well, Yeshua gave us these teachings. Maybe is this what we call the last 2,000 years of church age? But the point is, at some point, somebody's going to wake up, zadi. Well, he says, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end, and that word is spelled kuf zadi, and it means awaken. So to awaken and to sprout is like the 12 tribes of Israel coming back from the dead, waking up from their self-induced coma, having eaten the poison apple like the Snow White story. And when we do, kuf, rise up and ascend to do righteousness. It's not the rule the world as another heavy-fisted overlord ruining and destroying everything like a bunch of stupid jerks, like most of the history of the tribes of Israel and Judah. If you read the Old Testament, all through the time after Solomon, gosh, it's not to replay that. It's to do what he said and act like dignified, heroic individuals that each one of us should be, filled with his ruach, modeled after following in the footsteps, following the trace of Yeshua, who's the, as it were, the ship of state of the kingdom of Yahweh. Yod-He Vav-He. And as we rule and reign with him instead of contrary to him on the face of the earth, as it says in Zechariah and Ezekiel and many other places, as Fred was telling us the other day, he's found, what is it, 92 chapters and then some, talking about this.
Counting, yeah.
That's right in here. And then when the end comes, he'll make a new heaven and a new earth once everything he said has happened. So we can't be any further along than right here. And if we're here, we got a lot farther to go. But even if we're here, there's another phase. He cannot end this planet before that phase. And that phase has nothing to do with the NWO boys thinking they're going to rule this planet, kill most of us, and take over. They got the wrong eschatology. They can make plans. There's a verse, I've read it before. It says, the mistress of Babylon, having wiped out, conquered all her enemies, she sits on her throne and says, ha ha, look at me, it's only me, no other, ha ha, no contenders. And then Yahweh says, but you didn't remember that I promised my people a future and a hope. This is the eschatology. This is the map. This is the staging of the theater of Yahweh's Am Israel. And that song, Am Israel Chai, people of Israel, live, take hope. There is a promise of a future and a hope. I believe it's present tense. It has nothing to do with the portent, the calamity of blood red moons, other than to say, wake up! Read Hebrew. Shalom Aleichem. B'Shem Yahuwah.
Woo! Thanks, Eric.